The Dallas Cowboys. Talk about a very different draft from what you see in Dallas. Jerry Jones is known for taking the sexy pick in the first round, and everything he does feels like news headlines. So we'll start things off with the needs: linebacker, D-line, cornerback, offensive line. I think a lot of people would agree that defense was the big thing that they needed to work on going into this year. You can argue as much as you want how good the team was before Dak Prescott got hurt. They were still 2-3, and it wasn't because of their offense. It was because of how poor that defense was doing. Prescott was putting up numbers, but that defense was also allowing them. So we'll start things off starting with the round number 1, pick number 12, the highlight pick of them all, Micah Parsons, the linebacker. Eli, I know you were really high on him. Super explosive. He moves a lot faster than his size would typically allow a normal human to move. He plays like smaller than he actually is, which is really bizarre for how big of a guy he is. Edge rusher mentality. He's not afraid to get after the quarterback, things like that. The biggest knocks really were just kind of like, he's a little bit average in terms of coverage for somebody that is as athletic as he is. He opted out of last year, and this was something I did not know until I was really looking into all their picks in the draft. Apparently, there was a little bit of concern because he was pegged as one of the ringleaders in Penn State's hazing scandal they had going on. So that was kind of like a news thing to me. I didn't actually know that was going on. I don't really follow the college that much, so that was kind of news to me. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good pick. A little weird. They have a lot of depth at linebacker, obviously with guys like Jalen Smith, Dylan Toe, but their ability to not stay on the field really made this solidified this pick for Jerry Jones. Also, it was no secret that Jerry Jones wanted either Pat Surtain or J.C. Horn. Those were his two top guys on his board. That was no secret. So that's why we saw the intra-division trade, which is really antithetical to what Jerry Jones likes to do, but I think it was a very smart move.
Mm-hmm.
You only moved down 2 picks. At 10, you were probably going to pick Micah Parsons anyways. So you moved down 2 picks and added a third rounder,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was a really good pick. But Micah Parsons, 4.39 speed, flies around the field. Set the freshman record at Penn State with 83 tackles. That's a freshman record there. So he's a high impact guy. If he hits, we could be talking about the next elite linebacker in the league. His athletic abilities off the charts. Great tackler, sideline to sideline capabilities. Like you said, not as great in coverage, but had 6.5 sacks, 19 tackles for loss, 6 forced fumbles, and 5 pass deflections. So all around the field type of guy, a guy that you can plug and play at linebacker. Could be their starter for the next decade if they play their cards right.
Oh, yeah.
No real injury history to report of. Nothing really that concerns you. Obviously, Russ might concern you a little bit because he opted out last year, didn't play last year. Probably ended up helping his draft stock as see how poorly Penn State played last year. I might have slid him down the board a bit, but Micah Parsons is a guy that could be high impact, could easily win Defensive Rookie of the Year. Probably at this point the front runner for that award. But it's going to be interesting to see how the Cowboys work him into their system.
Definitely. It feels like there might be kind of like a change of the guard at the linebacker position there. You cited the injury issues that they have there. I felt that linebacker was kind of a pressing need for them going into the offseason when they didn't really address it too much going through free agency. I figured linebacker would be something that came up. Like you were saying, I was expecting them to go corner. Cornerbacks obviously jumped off the board a little bit high, which kind of put them in a weird position going into round number 2 because they picked up cornerback Kelvin Joseph out of Kentucky. I thought this was kind of a reach. He was not the highest corner on the board. Talented guy, he's a great tackler, which you can, if you can get a corner that's very good at tackling, fantastic. You always want good corners that can tackle. He has very good burst. His interceptions, he's very quick to, come off that back pedal, make the interception, and then just go the other way. I think he had 217 yards of return yards off of interceptions off the 4 he had this past season, which is a pretty high number. That's 2 whole football fields. On top of that, I guess the biggest knocks were his inconsistency because he has up games, he has down games, but the up games are what really helped elevate him, and I think gave the Cowboys a reason to go so high for him on this was because he had strong games against Alabama, Tennessee, some of the bigger name schools that you want to see NFL caliber talent step up and play well in. So I guess that's partially why they were so willing to go so high for Kelvin Joseph. What do you think on this one?
Yeah, I like Kelvin Joseph. One of the biggest question marks, which is probably why he had a 2nd to 3rd round grade on him, was his commitment to football. There's some focus concerns with him. One of my favorite facts, Kelvin Joseph is actually a part-time rapper. He goes by the name You Know Divide, Boss Man Fat. He's actually not bad. I gave him a listen. Not bad.
I did not know that. I did not know that.
Yeah. He's got all the measurable tools you want in a cornerback. Has 4.34 40-yard time. Flies around the field. Plays just as fast as his 40 time would tell you. Has some concerns too about his focus. When he was at LSU before he transferred to Kentucky, he got suspended for a bowl game. Didn't really cite reasons as to why. Just said violation of team rules. So you're going to be interested to see how that works out, but he'll get a chance to play right away in that Cowboys secondary, which besides Trevon Diggs is very weak and not very talented, but it's going to be interesting to see. He's got great ball skills. 5 pass deflections and 4 interceptions this past season in just 9 games. So he's got the ball skills you'd want in a cornerback you're taking in the second round. So if they can reach his potential in Dallas, then they may have gotten a first round talent, but be interesting to watch him perform.
So going through the third round, they had 3 picks in the third round. Obviously, they added that one when they made the trade back with the Eagles. So I highlighted the Nashon Wright pick, cornerback out of Oregon State. This is a guy that he has like freakish size for a cornerback. He's like 188 pounds, 6'4", super tall, very quick for somebody his size. He has a really good nose for the football. The biggest knock to him was his inability to play as strong as he should be for somebody his size. He's not really great in press coverage. And on top of that, he's a little bit slow to react on double moves. You know, like he's good staying off of like a quick move, but when it comes to like multiple move routes, if a wide receiver is really trying to shake him, it seems like he's a little bit slow to react on multiple. According to all the scouting reports that I was able to read on him, that could obviously be something that ends up being an issue in the NFL because, you know, a lot of wide receivers, especially those top tier guys, they become very shifty. They're very quick. And, you know, when you think of some of the receivers that aren't as athletic, they rely on those double, triple moves to really lose a cornerback to try to get themselves open. It'll be interesting to see how he handles that. I just feel like it was such a reach when I was going through PFF's grading chart. He's like the 272nd ranked pick. And there's only 258 picks in the entire draft. And so that's like somebody who's graded, obviously PFF's not the be all end all, but they do a pretty good job grading guys. Man, like I just thought, again, another reach at a position you need. I guess like they're going off athleticism. Again, the size and the speed is there. He's very fast, very tall. Hopefully, you know, he can hold his own against some of the bigger receivers in the league. That's very interested on that pick. It's a team need, but it just makes me question if it was the right pick in the third round there. Do you have any thoughts on maybe D tackle? This one's a mouthful here. Odigizua. I was going to say. Osa Odigizua, D tackle to UCLA, and then Chauncey Golson, D end out of Iowa. Any information on those 2 guys and thoughts on them if you do?
Yeah. Super quick about Nashon Wright. Defensive coordinator new this year, Dan Quinn. You'll remember him. He was the defensive coordinator for the Legion of Boom in Seattle, so he has an affinity for these big corners.
Yeah, he had Brandon
Obviously,
Browner.
We saw Richard Sherman at 6'3" and Brandon Browner locking down people. Brandon Browner is probably a pretty good comparison for Nashon Wright. Both big corners, like to use their size to their advantage, but interesting to see there. Nashon Wright, I did have as a day 3 pick, so getting him around 3 was a little interesting, but I don't hate the pick in general. But as for the 2 defensive linemen, Chauncey Golson out of Iowa, super productive kid. Not really like an elite athlete. Only runs a 4.8 40, which is not what you're looking for when you're for an edge rusher. So it'll be interesting to see. Very productive in college. 27 tackles for loss in 43 games, 12 sacks. Has good length, high-end motor. Could be a good, solid rotational piece. And as for Osa Odigizua, a little bit undersized for an interior pass rusher, only 6'1", 282. But he was extremely disruptive in the Pac-12 last year at UCLA. 27.5 tackles for loss, 11.5 sacks, 43 games. Interior group is not a strength of this team. I was hoping they'd go after a guy like Christian Barmore earlier in the draft, but didn't end up working out that way. The group includes Tristan Hill, their second rounder from last year. And then Neville Gallimore, third rounder from 2020.
Just a quick thought. They picked 15th in the second round, correct? Pick 44, 32. So what? That's 12. So they're 12 is what it is. Barrymore got picked up at 15. And they didn't go after him. Interesting. Interesting. I didn't put two and two together until you just said that out loud. Keep going though. Sorry, I didn't mean to stop you on that.
Yeah, no, you're good. Yeah, Odigizua, probably will end up playing right away given the lack of depth they have at that position.
Yeah, D-line was a big issue.
Yeah. Another guy that had day 3 grades on him, so they might have reached for him as well too. But again, you see Jerry Jones. The defense was the worst defense they probably had in about 40 years. So he knew he needed to go after the defense in this draft. So they like guys. They let Dan Quinn, his fingerprints all over this draft. So they let Dan Quinn pick a defense that he feels good about. So interesting to see going forward.
Now, the 4th round, I like the 4th round. I think the 4th round was a pretty good round for them. You're able to get Gabriel Cox, linebacker out of LSU with their pick number 115 there in the 4th round. This is the 5th ranked linebacker in the entire draft. So getting one of the top 5 backers at round number 4, I think, day 3 pick, that's a really solid pick. This is something that I think will really help them because last year, I wish I had the number up, and I should have done that. I should have grabbed that number before we started doing this. I think Dallas let up 400 and some, or maybe it was 500 and some odd points throughout the entire year. They were letting up an absurd amount of pass yardage numbers. So adding somebody like Gabriel Cox, who maybe not as strong in the run game as you would like him to be, but Micah Parsons can it almost feels like these 2 picks were like them trying to move away from the current linebackers they have, and they're hoping like Micah Parsons is the big run block, like big run stuffer kind of guy, paired with Cox, who's going to be more of the pass coverage guy, where like you can expect Parsons to stuff the run and maybe blitz more while, you have Cox kind of dropping back with the DBs and things like that, playing more athletic. Some people said like if this was 15 some odd years ago, he'd probably be more of like a free safety than he would be a linebacker, but obviously the way the game's evolving, linebackers are getting smaller and faster. I like the pick. I think this is one of the best picks they had in the draft because, again, such a late pick, top 5 linebacker in the draft, and this is somebody who can really help mitigate some of the passing yards that they were letting up all throughout the entirety of last season.
Yeah, definitely. Gabriel Cox, elite coverage linebacker, maybe the best coverage linebacker in this draft. Good against the run. Needs to shore up some of his technique on that as well. Not really much of a pass rusher. That's not really the situation you're going to use him in. But 26 pass deflections in college and 9 interceptions. So he's got really good ball skills as well. Covering tight ends was the focal point of the Cowboys' porous defense last year, not being able to shore up that middle of the field. Tight ends were just kind of running all over them. So a guy like Gabriel Cox, even though he's a day 3 selection, I think he'll step in and start right away.
Oh, yeah.
Named a captain at LSU after transferring from North Dakota State, sorry. So real high, really high on this kid. I was kind of shocked he fell this far.
Me too.
He's kind of small. He's not huge for a linebacker, especially a coverage linebacker, with the way tight ends are getting just bigger and faster. So it'll be interesting to see how he does in the NFL, especially in a division where you got tight ends like Zach Ertz running around, and Logan Thomas, former quarterback turned tight end, who's massive.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But I thought this was a really solid selection. Maybe their best value pick of the entire draft.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Probably the best value pick, that day 3 spot. I can't believe he fell that far either. So as for the remaining 5 picks here, 2 that I wanted to pick out specifically that I really like, that I would say the rivals or is right behind him in terms of value picks. Quinton Bohanna, the D tackle out of Kentucky. This guy he's 6'4", 357. When I started reading about him, I was like, okay, this sounds like a guy who's going to manhandle people. I need to see some highlights. So I was watching some clips of him. Dude, he takes people and removes them. And it's unbelievable the power that he has on display. I mean, he can literally just ragdoll a player if he needs to. Really big first step, right out of the gates. He's very quick off the jump. The biggest knocks, I guess, is that people are concerned about is he plays really upright, which is something I noticed for somebody that's such a large human being. He is very upright. You'd expect him to try to get a little bit lower, but that is probably one of the biggest issues. On top of that, his size being 357, the knock is that he has a little bit too much bad weight on him and probably would play better, closer to 330, 325, something like that. So that might be something that, obviously, being on an NFL team, you have some of the best nutritionists and, trainers in the world, but maybe they can whip him into a little bit better shape as they go through the preseason and, training camp situations and whatnot. The other pick that I really, really liked, that I'm a really big fan of because, the Cowboys had such a strong offensive line not too long ago, and it seems like piece by piece it's kind of slowly coming undone. This is, I think, a really good depth piece for them, and somebody who could, potentially, if molded right, could end up being a really good guy for them is Matt Farniok, guard out of Nebraska. He's played all three positions on the O-line, which you cannot understate how important that is. Somebody that can plug and play at every single position is huge. The Colts, me being a Colts fan, I've always focused in on their offensive line because that has been a horrible issue for us the last handful of years. We have had a guy or two here and there who have always been able to plug and play pretty much every single position, and that's something you always need to have, where no matter whose goes down, you can turn to him and be like, hey, we need you to go here and plug in and go. So I think that's really good. He's a very strong leader. He's a two-time captain over there in Nebraska. He's a guy that, just keeps the wheels turning. Even when he makes contact, he's not just going to get kind of halted in his place. So keeps the wheels turning. And obviously not the best pass protector, that and run blocker, but somebody that, in round 7, where you get that kind of experience and, utility out of a guy, I think you cannot understate that enough. So I really, really like that pick.
Yeah, absolutely. Farniok was a guy I really like. Obviously, getting him in the 7th round, you take 0 risk on him, but he's a 2-time team captain at Nebraska. So with Dallas not re-signing Joe Looney yet, and Tyler Biadasz probably sliding into that starting center position, you needed some depth on the interior of your offensive line. That's definitely where he played some tackle in college, but I think he's probably going to slide into the middle of that offensive line, probably at one of the guard slots. So I thought that was a really good pick. And then they made one of the weirder picks of the draft. Israel Makwama from cornerback from South Carolina. Obviously, that's J.C. Horn's cornerback partner mate. Exact same player as Nashon Wright, another really big guy. He's about 6'4", 214. So he's a little thicker, but big guy, plays big. Exact same player as Nashon Wright. So I thought that was a really interesting double dipping to get the same type of player. Again, that one had Dan Quinn's fingerprints written all over it. There were a bunch of different players still left on the board that I had circled as good fits for Dallas, so I thought that was a really interesting pick for them. And then the other two offensive players that they picked, Simi Fehoko, wide receiver out of Stanford, another really big guy, 6'4", 222, has good speed for his size. He ran a 4.43 40 time. So not really a position of need. Obviously, the Cowboys have arguably one of the best wide receiver groups in the league with Gallup, Amari Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, they used a first-round pick last year, but really interesting pick. Could be really good. Very similar to another guy out of Stanford a couple years ago, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who went in the 2nd round to Philly, never really panned out in the league so far. But that could be a guy who sticks with them, whether it's with the practice squad or earning a roster spot out of camp. It could be a really good depth piece, so I thought that was interesting. And then Josh Ball, offensive tackle out of Marshall. Josh Ball was somebody who was seen as somebody who could potentially go higher in this draft, but had some problems with some dating violence issues. Back at Florida State, Florida State kicked him out of school. He ended up transferring to Marshall. Didn't have any problems with Marshall, but
the history's there.
So it'd be interesting to see. Cowboys also have a history of bringing guys like that. A guy like Lael Collins comes to mind, who they picked a couple of years ago. So it'll be interesting to see. While we're talking about Lael Collins, obviously Collins and Tyron Smith both had a share of injury issues. So Josh Ball could be seen as a long-term piece, maybe take over a right tackle. He's seen as a good enough athlete to play out on that edge. So really interesting draft by Dallas. They got a couple day one starters, I think. Parsons, Kelvin Joseph, Gabriel Cox, and at least one of the two defensive linemen will probably start day one. So they got multiple day one starters on the defensive line, which I thought was good. But I didn't really see like the home run pick that I thought, wow, this was a great fit and this was a great way to go. I feel very meh on this Cowboys draft class.
So I'm curious what your grade is, because after I sent you the grade that I gave them on the list there, so you know what I have written down. But after talking out loud some more, I feel a little bit different about it, and I'm curious to see what you thought of their grade, and then I'll give mine.
Yeah, the Cowboys, like I said, kind of an interesting draft. Obviously, it was no secret they got jumped a couple times for players they want, losing out on the J.C. Horn and Pat Surtain. Then they wanted Trevon Morgan the second round. Obviously, Vegas jumped them to go up and get him. So lost out on a couple players that I thought would have been more immediate day one impact players that would have definitely raised my grade for the Cowboys. I don't think what they did was necessarily bad. They needed defensive depth. Defensively, they were horrendous last year. They were an embarrassment defensively. And with Dak Prescott coming back this year, they could be much more competitive in a very, very winnable NFC East. The NFC East is as wide open as could be. So I definitely see them as a team that's going to be right in the thick of things towards the end of the year. They definitely needed to get deeper on the defense, and they did, which was good. Took a lot of chances on guys that I don't think you needed to. Doubled up at positions I don't think you needed to.
Yeah.
So I give them a C+. I think they did well. I don't think they did great. Very anti-Jerry Jones draft. This looked like more of a Patriots draft than a Dallas Cowboys draft, but I'm glad Jerry Jones addressed the defense. This could end up being a really good class for them, but for now, I'm going to give them a C+.
All right, fair enough. So I hate that I'm going to change my grade after talking because I had them written as a B+, A-, and I think I weighed just the fact that they went defense so hard because I was a fan of that. I was like, the defense needed to be addressed, but like the more I looked into some of these players, the more I felt like they reached. And so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give them a B. I'm going to be a little bit more generous. I'm going to hit them with a B, and I'm going to weigh the fact that they hit team needs so aggressively that shows, commitment to the issues that you had and recognizing your team's faults and where they lied. I'm going to go with a B. I think that's a solid grade. Like you said, they doubled up on some positions. 3 cornerbacks in the draft. I have a feeling someone's going to end up being flipped to safety because on the team needs list, I didn't put safety, but safety was something that a few other places that I was looking at had like recommended as a place for them to kind of look. And so I have a feeling that maybe one of these corners ends up being swapped over to a larger safety. I don't know who that might end up being. Maybe it's
that would definitely be Israel Makwama. He actually has some experience. He started his career at safety at South Carolina, but they flipped into cornerback.
Okay.
Because they had a bigger need there. At 6'4", 215, I don't know if he's going to have the speed and lateral quickness to keep up with NFL receivers. So I think safety might be a better option for him.
And maybe that's where they're going. So I'm gonna hit them with the B. I'm comfortable with that. I initially wrote them as a B+, A-, but I think I jumped a little bit high on that. I was very happy with the whole defense. I thought they really needed that. But after talking about some of these guys with you, I definitely think B sounds about right for me.